Farewell, little book room. Iris and Robin were relaxing in the hammock after dinner when Arlo said, "Robin, your parents are calling you." They looked over to the roof to see Balba and Fern outside waving at them. Unlike last time, though, this time they appeared to be in a state of panic. "Arlo, quick, take me down to them." Robin hastily asked his friend and flew like the wind onto his back. As Arlo descended to the roof, Fern and Balba clutched onto the rain canopy for dear life, one hand outstretched like flood victims waiting for a helicopter to rescue them. "Arlo, would you mind taking them over to the hammock?" asked Robin from his friend's back. "No problem," said Arlo and flew over to Balba and Fern flapping his wings loudly. As he drew close, he spread his claws as wide as he could and took hold of the pair of them. Fern screamed, but Balba said nothing. The next moment Iris was helping her mother into the hammock, which creaked and rolled like a ship as Balba landed in it after her. Last of all, Robin jumped in from Arlo's back. "What on earth happened?" Robin demanded. Fern stared at her children, her face white as a sheet, unable to answer. "Please excuse me for having taken emergency measures. You seem to be in a terrible hurry," Arlo said to Balba by way of apology. Once he'd regained his composure, Balba explained what had happened. "We heard Lily calling out to us that it's okay to go back down now, but it was terrifying when Shin came charging into the room like that. He used to be such a sweet boy. I wonder why he's come to hate us so much. I was really convinced he might kill us." Robin and Iris exchanged a look. They had never dreamt the crisis would come in this form. They had only lured their parents outside the last time simply to surprise them with how capable they had become. "We can stay here for a while. Iris and I will bring food. Shin won't be able to come after us here," Robin said, trying to comfort his mother. Arlo was eyeing a big cloud in the sky, a large cumulonimbus that appeared to be bringing rain their way. Fern held on tight to the edge of the hammock and looked around. The very height made her feel nauseous, and she closed her eyes and said, "Balba, I'm going back down. This place will be the death of me." "But listen," said Balba fearfully, "Shin might still be down there." But I can't stand being so high up with so much space around me." "Iris, Robin, take me back down. Ask your friend to take me back." Arlo first took Robin to check it was safe for her to return, then Iris accompanied her mother, holding onto Arlo's legs as he took them down to the roof. Balba hadn't yet made up his mind to return. When he saw his wife and daughter were safely back inside their home, though, he bashfully asked Arlo, "I'm sorry, but would you mind taking me back too? I tend to get dizzy in high places." He was impressed how Arlo seemed to be a loyal friend to his son. Having gently put him back down on the roof, Arlo took off once more to fetch Iris's hammock. When he came back, Balba said, "Thank you. How long have you been friends with my children?" "Since last autumn, I think it was. The first time Robin got on my back, it was so ticklish I couldn't bear it. But now I hardly notice him when he rides on me," the pigeon said with a chuckle. "All the rest of my family have moved to the countryside, but I couldn't bring myself to leave Robin and Iris." "Do you by any chance have plans to take your family somewhere else?" Balba didn't know how to answer. "I'd better ask them. I'll talk to them tonight." The pigeon looked at him doubtfully. "Please take care. If you don't hurry up, you never know what might happen." Balba wiped the sweat from his brow and said goodbye to his children's clever friend. That night, against the sound of the rain pouring outside, Balba and his family had a meeting at Fern's bedside. When Lily had brought them their milk that evening, she had been deeply relieved to see they'd come back home. "We'll probably be evacuating to Nigiri and Shinshu. Are you okay with that? You'd better start getting ready to go, okay? I'll be sure to take you with me, I promise," she told them. The two adults in the Ash family didn't understand what she meant by evacuate, so Robin explained what he'd heard from Arlo, that it meant the same as move house. He also told them about the animals in the zoo that had been killed last August, because everyone expected there to be terrible air raids soon. Fern was in bed feeling unwell. After everything that had happened today, she was a pale shadow of her usual self. "I'll go with Lily," put in Iris, who never normally said much. "It's dangerous to stay in Tokyo." But however frightened Fern and Balba were of Shin, they couldn't make up their minds to leave the quiet little book room that had been their home for so many years. "If I end up somewhere high up, like today, or get caught in the rain, it'll be the death of me, said Fern weakly, conscious of the heavy rain outside. Everything worked out okay today because Arlo was looking out for us, but if we set out on a journey, who knows what terrible things might happen. When Drake brought us here in a basket 30 years ago, it was terrible. We were really shaken up and down and all around. It was even worse than being in that hammock, I can tell you, Balba said, launching into the old story. Robin interrupted him. Let's get one thing clear, father. Even if you insist on staying here, Iris and I are going with Lily. And Arlo's coming with us. We're moving to the countryside. Robin and Iris, wait a minute, admonished Balba, trying to reassert his authority. Just think, this so-called air raid might never happen. And you have to take into consideration that life in the countryside is not without its dangers. But Robin and Iris just shrugged. And with that, the discussion came to an end. That night, Balba and Fern lay awake long after the children had already fallen asleep. The faint light from their handmade lamp illuminated the bedroom. Once again, they were recalling all the months and years since they had made this place their home 3 decades earlier. Loved by 2 generations of Greenwood children, they had truly been happy. They had raised 2 healthy children, both of them born here in Japan, and over the years had steadily acquired more furniture to make their home ever more comfortable. Until that day last year when 2 strange men had burst into the little book room and taken away some books, and Drake Greenwood along with them, they had lived in peace. Why can't we just carry on living here quietly? Fern asked Balba. Why? You'll have to ask the big people that, replied Balba testily. All I know is that something changed Sweet Shin's heart and made him a patriot, some big, invisible force that is robbing us of our peaceful life and dragging us and the Greenwood family down into the abyss. But who on earth is doing such a thing? Asked Fern sharply. That's enough. It's late, so go to sleep, Balba said grumpily. He himself didn't know. What on earth was that hateful force? What was its true form? At the beginning of August, Finn unexpectedly came back home from Kyoto. His arrival meant they could go ahead with the evacuation of Lily and the Ash family right away. The result of Lily's physical at the end of July had meant she had officially been declared ineligible to join the mass evacuation on account of her weak bronchial tubes. Upon hearing this result, Joy began to feel reluctant even to send her to their relatives in the countryside. However, it seemed that Finn knew far more than Joy just how dark the prospects for the war were. Saipan has already fallen, and the air raids on Tokyo could start any time. Let's at least make sure Lily's somewhere safe, Mother. Finn went daily to Lily's school and the ward office to make the arrangements for her transfer. It was decided that he would take her to Nijiri on August 10th. He also went to visit their father in prison and informed him of the plans. Balba and Fern had resigned themselves to the evacuation and had started making preparations for the move. Joy's foreign-made leather-covered brooch made a convenient trunk for the family's possessions, and Balba set about removing the metal fittings. Fern's green trunk quickly filled up with various undergarments and other clothing, as well as her sewing kit, which contained needles and thread just as it had done when she inherited it from her mother Beatrice, and the little box containing the rainbow dyes that had been passed down through generations of little people. There wasn't enough space for her dresses, but she couldn't bear to leave them behind, and so she set about repacking the trunk. Balba placed the blanket that Iris had knitted for him at the bottom of his black trunk. Then he wrapped in old rags his shoemaking hammer, nails, chisel, and plane, and put them on top. He greased his and Fern's new shoes before putting them in too. He intended to carry on using the mill for making acorn flour up until the morning of departure. Iris put her rainbow-dyed spider's silk in her red Morocco leather trunk. She also put in the hammock and several skeins of the special thick, newly bleached spider's silk she used for rope. Then she neatly folded the pink silk blouse Fern had made for her a long time ago and ribbons she herself had knitted. Unwilling to be without her ivory knitting needles even for a short time, she put them in a small carrier bag she had knitted herself. Finally, she squeezed in her red lace-up shoes, and with that her packing was finished. Robin tried hard to fit his picture book into his trunk, but at 12.5 centimeters it was just too big. But he couldn't bear to part with it, since it was a memento of his friend the tiger and the other animals that had been shot at Ueno Zoo, and so he tied it up with string so that he could carry it on his shoulders. He would hold his new lace-up shoes in his free hand. Now that he had no use for his trunk, he decided to give it to his mother. Fern put all the emergency rations of cheese she had made over the past months into it, and then got Iris to help her prepare pancakes adapted to last them several days in the midsummer heat. They spent the 7th and 8th of August kneading acorn flour with powdered milk and frying the cakes until they were as crunchy as rice crackers, while Balba sat at the mill grinding acorns into flour. Arlo, upon hearing the little people's plans to move to Shinshu, thought the time had come for him, too, to move. That spring his elderly parents and the others had left Tokyo and headed for Senkoji Temple in Nagano. It was a tough journey for the pigeons, weakened from living in Tokyo where food was scarce. But Arlo decided to go even farther north than his parents to join Iris and Robin in the vicinity of Lake Nijiri. "I'll go on ahead," Arlo told the pair when they came out onto the roof one day. "When you get to Nijiri, tie one of Iris's colorful ribbons onto the branch of a big tree where you're living, won't you? I'll be looking out for it, so ask Lily to tie it on a branch as high up as she can manage, okay?" Arlo spoke calmly, but deep down he was worried whether or not he'd ever be able to find them again. "Arlo, please take care," said Iris, her eyes full of tears. She felt sorry that they had never been able to do anything for this big friend who had helped them so much. "Oh, Arlo, let's tie one of Iris's ribbons around your foot too. That way we can keep an eye out for you and recognize you right away," Robin said brightly. Iris went back inside and rummaged around her rainbow-colored ribbons in the red leather trunk, selecting the most beautiful of them to take back up to Arlo. "Here you are, Arlo. We'll definitely see you wearing this." "Thank you, Iris." "Well, I'll be on my way." "Goodbye, Arlo." "Goodbye, Robin." Arlo flew off alone northwestwards, the ribbon on his leg glinting in the light. "Now it's just us left here. I do hope we'll meet Arlo again." The two of them sat on the branch of the big tree and watched their friend fly off until he was just a speck in the sky. After Finn came home, Joy was laid up in bed for 2 or 3 days, secure in the knowledge she could rely on her son to take charge. The days passed peacefully, as if the war and all it involved were far away. Once she had recovered, she made some new indigo-dyed work pants and an extra air raid hood for Lily. When she had finished those, even though the weather now was hot, she took out some wool and started knitting a jumper for her daughter. She had hardly ever met the two women at the house in Nijiri, and though they were relatives, she was still a little reluctant to entrust her sickly daughter to them. For the moment, though, it made her feel better to be busying herself with knitting something for her with the wool her grandparents in Sydney had sent. Lily found a big rattan basket in her father's bedroom. It was apparently what he'd used to bring Balba and his family to this house all those years ago, and so she spread out her own baby blanket inside it and covered this with one of the towels that had come from Sydney. This would be the little people's home while they were traveling in the train. Once she had added their own trunks and the blue glass goblet, the little people's preparations for the move would be complete. On the evening of August 8th, Finn queued up at the station to buy their tickets. Lily joined the crowds, waving off her school friends joining the mass evacuation, as if they were soldiers being sent off to fight. When she saw Yasuko and Kumiko and the others in such high spirits, as if they were off on an excursion, she felt a bit lonely at being the odd one out. But once they arrived at the darkened Ueno station and the schoolchildren went alone onto the platform, even Yasuko and Kumiko's eyes filled with tears. And Yasuko's mother, who took Lily home afterwards, cried all the way back. Lily clutched tightly onto her hand, but her thoughts were filled with her impending separation from her own mother and couldn't think of anything to say to comfort her. If there was anything that worried Lily about going to Nijiri, it was that she had to leave without patching things up with Shin and without being able to see her father. For some time now, whenever Lily mentioned her father, her mother's face would freeze and the atmosphere would suddenly feel tense. And so she would hold her tongue as surely as if someone had hissed "sh." In her dreams, though, her father always looked skinny and covered in blood like the picture of Christ on the cross that she'd seen in the little book room. And he was saying something to her, but she couldn't hear what. However much she called Daddy, Daddy, she couldn't hear his answer. On August 9th, Joy came to Lily's room dressed in her best black work trousers. Lily, get dressed and let's go. We're going to see your father. Lily looked at her mother in surprise. Can you promise me that whatever you see, you won't ask questions and you won't cry? Lily nodded and stood up. They had to change trains several times before arriving at the gray building where her father was imprisoned. She and her mother entered through a door with iron gratings. The loud clang as it slammed closed behind them was followed by the heavy clunk of a key turning in the lock. And there, standing right in the middle of the room, was her father. He wasn't covered in blood as in her dreams. But his gentle, indulgently good-humored face had become horrifyingly bloated and was covered with a beard, and she realized how much he had been suffering. When you go to Nigeri, I want you to become as suntanned and strong as the local children. Then, saying nothing more, he sat smiling at her with infinite gentleness. In this hot, oppressive room, Lily felt exhaustion seep through her body and thought she might suffocate from the heat and shock. The fact that her father could smile at her so gently was almost more than she could bear. At last the gray door opened once more, and they heard the clunk of the lock being turned behind them as they left the building in which her father was imprisoned and went outside again. But why? Why on earth? Lily suppressed the questions that rose to her lips as she walked alongside her mother. Even if she never got to meet her father again as long as she lived, she would never forget that smiling face he showed her today, she thought. The night of August 9th was a sleepless one, both for the Greenwood family and the Ash family. Joy was up until nearly 1 o'clock finishing off Lily's sweater. At the beginning of last year, grown-up Finn had left home, then Drake had been taken away, and now little Lily was about to leave. Joy couldn't shake the idea that her family was being broken up. In just 1 or 2 years, some great force had risen up and trampled on her wishes and forcefully scattered all the members of the happy family she held so dear. No, it wasn't just the Greenwood family. Parents and children in families all over Japan had been robbed of the happiness of living together. Finn and Shin tossed and turned in bed, apparently unable to sleep. Lily slept, utterly worn out. Joy focused on her knitting, thinking that she didn't want to lose any of these children. In the little book room, too, the 2 children were asleep, but Fern and Balba lay awake. Just the thought that this was their last night in the jelb sort beds they had used for the past 30 years was enough for Fern to choke up. We'll be able to come back here, won't we? She pressed Balba. Let's hope so, he replied, his voice tremulous. It was nearly dawn by the time they managed to sleep. The lamp in their room used up the last remaining oil and fizzled out. Day broke on August 10th. Joy cooked up some special red bean rice, using precious white rice with azuki beans, for Finn and Lily to take with them for the journey. Thanks to Finn's cheerful presence, the morning of Lily's departure was a lively occasion. Shin completely ignored the preparations for the little people, but Finn helped Lily take the big old basket up to the little book room. Iris and Balba had come halfway down the bookshelf and were waiting for them. Finn felt his chest tighten upon meeting them after such a long time. Balba had visibly aged, while Iris had grown into a beautiful young woman. Neither showed any hesitation as they stepped fearlessly onto the palm of his hand. Gently, Finn carried each of them, together with their luggage, to the basket. In the little home up near the ceiling, he could hear a sound like bumblebee wings. It was Fern and Robin arguing. It had been so long since he'd heard the little people's voices that he had lost the ability to distinguish between them. And so he climbed up the bookcase and peered in at them. The little boy was staggering under the weight of a book as big as himself that he was attempting to hoist onto his shoulders. His mother was trying to stop him, telling him it was dangerous. Finn deftly took the book from him. It was old and had the title "The Zoo" printed on its yellow cover. Finn had never seen it before. He gestured to the boy that he would put it in the basket for him. Overjoyed, Robin carried his own black lace-up shoes and his mother's trunk onto Finn's outstretched hand. Fern was the only one left, but she was clearly terrified of Finn. Now in his 2nd year of high school, he was 170 centimeters tall and a fine young man. It was hardly surprising that Fern, at barely 14 centimeters, was scared of him. Noticing this, Lily went to her rescue. Keeping her eyes firmly shut, Fern stepped onto Lily's hand. Balba and the others were waiting anxiously as Lily gently placed her in the bottom of the basket with them. Once she saw that they were all safely settled and Fern shrieked, "The fridge! My fridge!" Lily asked Finn to get the fridge from the little people's kitchen, and he put it into the basket with them, along with the mysterious blue glass goblet and a can of precious milk powder. Now they were ready for the move. "Everyone okay? Be patient now. When we reach the house in the mountains this evening, I'll make your home right away," Lily told them kindly. The basket's lid creaked as she lowered it and snapped the clasp shut. It wobbled as she lifted it up, and Fern closed her eyes tightly. "Farewell. Farewell." Robin and Iris poked their arms through the gaps in the basket and waved to the little book room that had been their home. The dust-covered books remained silent as always. "Goodbye." Lily, too, as she stepped out of the little book room, turned back for one last look. It was the same as always, with the morning light glittering green and gold as it filtered down through the leaves of the big tree outside. Lily and Finn headed for Weno Station, accompanied by their mother and Shin. Finn had a rucksack on his back, while Lily carried the basket with the little people, now quiet, inside. Joy was carrying Lily's case, which contained the sky blue jumper that she'd just finished knitting for her that morning. How much more cheerful it was to set out in the morning than it had been for the mass evacuation that had left at night. When at last they arrived at the station, they found it thronged with people and luggage and flags and banners. Here and there they heard groups cheering Banzai as they saw off soldiers on their way to the front. "Well, it's time for you to go. Take care now. See you again soon." With barely time for a proper farewell, Lily left her mother at the ticket gate and concentrated on joining the throng of people headed for the platform. With his free hand, Finn held tightly onto her and pulled her along with him. With her heart pounding and jostled this way and that among the large pieces of baggage, she at last managed to push her way onto the train and get safely seated. The train quickly filled up, with people occupying every available space in the aisles and bathrooms, and even on the floor at Lily's and Finn's feet. They were all terrifying, with menacing looks on their faces. "Lily." Finn shook her shoulder and pointed to the window. Lily peered outside through all the people. On the commuter train platform next to there stood Joy and Shin. "Lily. Hey, give them a wave." Finn pushed his little sister, who was sitting in a daze, closer to the window. Shin noticed her and pointed her out to Joy, who was holding a handkerchief to her eyes. Shin bit his lip and stared at Lily with wide-open eyes. Tears dripped from Lily's eyes onto the basket on her lap. Finn pushed in front of her again and, waving, shouted something out of the window. The train started moving off to a chorus of Banzai. Shin was waving now, his face pale. "Goodbye." Lily was quite unable to move, and she sat gripping the basket on her lap, the tears streaming from her eyes. The house in the mountains. Clickety-clackety-clang. The train shuddered to a halt. Densely forested hillsides pressed in on either side of the tracks, and a river flowed noisily nearby. Shaken out of sleep, the passengers started clamoring. The train had almost reached Furuma, the stop before Finn's and Lily's station. Everyone waited in their seats, but as time passed without them knowing what the problem was, they began to grow restless. A ruckus broke out in the carriage before theirs and people started jumping out onto the tracks. A railway official approached and informed them that a little up ahead a freight train had been derailed, and the tracks were impassable in both directions. Nobody could tell how long it might take to put things right, he added, as he headed for the next carriage. All around them, the soldiers wearing red sashes across their chests, signifying they were headed for the front, paled and became agitated. Stepping over the people in the aisle, they clustered on the platform between the carriages discussing something excitedly. Finn agilely climbed out of the window and down onto the tracks and went to take a look up ahead. The red sash wearers jostled with each other as they jumped down from the platform and then set off at a run as if something was after them. After a while, Finn came back and told her, "Lily, we'll have to walk." Once they made it to Furuma, they would probably be able to hitch a ride with a truck to their station at Kashiwabara. And trains were apparently running from there, he told the other passengers in their carriage. Lily was actually quite relieved to get out of the train, which was far too hot. It felt pleasant to breathe in the cool, dry air outside, where they could hear the river. "Are you okay walking?" asked Finn as he hoisted his rucksack onto his back and picked up Lily's heavy case. As well as the basket, Lily was carrying an air raid pack and the remains of their lunch. "I'm fine," Lily said and smiled. All the passengers started walking along the tracks, carrying their luggage like refugees. Elderly women tied hand towels around their heads as protection against the afternoon sun, while mothers pulled their children along by the hand as they made their way towards the next station. As they passed the pitiful scene of the overturned freight train and broken tracks and entered the dark tunnel, Lily gulped and tried to hide her tears from Finn, who was leading her by the hand. Her feet were beginning to hurt, and though she was doing her best to be brave, she was feeling anxious and beginning to miss her mother. The light of a single torch came from behind to illuminate the ground beneath their feet. Lily swallowed her tears and looked at the person lighting the way for her. A young woman wearing trousers was walking at her side. As they neared the end of the tunnel and could see the bright sunlight, the woman turned off the torch and walked quickly on ahead without giving either Lily or Finn a chance to thank her. A rucksack swung heavily on her back. They couldn't tell whether she was a local or whether, like them, she was from the city. An army truck was parked on the road alongside the tracks near Fruma Station. It picked up people with a pass certifying they were on official military business, soldiers headed for the front, or civilians being drafted in for army work, and drove off in a cloud of dust. "Damn," muttered Finn and stared at the dusty white road. Lily looked pleadingly at her brother. She herself was exhausted, but she was even more worried about the little people in the basket. Had they survived being shaken around nonstop since morning? Finn fully understood his little sister's concern. "Lily, it doesn't look like we'll be able to get a lift in a truck after all, so shall we take the mountain path to the lake? I've been that way from Furuma before, and I think we'll be able to reach the house before dark." A steady stream of people passed by them, apparently resigned to walking to the next station at Kashiwabara. Lily agreed it would be better to take the mountain path, where she could let the little people breathe fresh air out of sight of the crowd. It was about 3:30. Had it not been for the accident, they would almost be at their grandparents' house by now. Finn hoisted Lily's case onto one shoulder and set off up the mountain path. He was dripping sweat, and the straps of his rucksack dug into his shoulders, and though the path wasn't all that steep, his heart pounded. He knew that his little sister had been crying in the tunnel earlier. This was what war meant, he thought with a frown, not allowing such a small girl to travel in the truck just because it was meant for the war effort. A young girl walking along hiding her sadness at leaving her mother. So many women and children walking uncomplainingly along the tracks. The baggage me and Lily are carrying on our backs is like that monstrous old man of the sea, the one that the sailor in the Arabian Nights couldn't get rid of. I've accepted that, and I'm even trying to beautify it as something heroic, a burden of war, but is that right? What if 10 years from now I find out it was a big mistake? No, that'll never happen. I'll be sent off to the front to kill the enemy and die for my country long before then. Finn recalled the words of one of his school friends in Kyoto. Our life as students is just a stay of execution, just until we go to war and die. He shook off the sweat that was running down into his eyes. White as a sheet, Lily walked behind her brother. Everything around her looked yellow, perhaps because of her usual anemia. Soon they were walking in long grass. Here and there pale purple bellflowers sparkled, and cream-colored daylilies trembled. Young pampas grasses higher than an adult's shoulder stretched out their pretty leaves. They emerged above the tree line onto the gentle slopes of a highland plain and heard the call of a bush warbler from below. "Lily, we just have one more mountain to cross, and then we'll see the lake." Finn threw his rucksack onto the grass and flopped down on his back. Lily gently put the basket down and then sat beside it. Immediately, black flies came and bit their bare arms as if they'd been lying in wait. They heard the grass behind them rustle, and then a white goat appeared, followed by a suntanned woman dressed in trousers. Lily seemed less surprised than the woman herself, who exclaimed, "Are you two going to the lake too?" Discreetly closing the clasp on the basket, Lily nodded. Finn sat up abruptly, startling the goat. "Stop it now, behave yourself," the woman told it, and started walking away. Wasn't she the one who had shown the light at their feet in the tunnel? She didn't seem all that accustomed to dealing with goats, as the animal was fairly dragging her along. We're going to Tsuchigasaki, and from there passing below Kamiyama, Finn said to her departing figure, almost as if to himself. The woman turned and said, "You'd better hurry up then. The sun will be going down soon." Finn looked at his watch and stood up hurriedly. Without a word, Lily picked up the basket and followed after her brother. Carrying her rucksack and holding onto the goat's lead, the woman pushed her way through pampas grass taller than herself and climbed steadily up. Finn shifted Lily's case from his right shoulder to the left and struggled to keep up with her. As they reached the top of the pine-forested hill, they at last glimpsed the quiet blue of Lake Nijiri stretching as far as they could see. The white goat set off down a narrow path through the pine forest towards the lake, and the woman followed after it as nimbly as a mountain sorrow. "Come on, Lily, we'd better hurry too." Finn seemed to have forgotten his tiredness and went bounding down the steep slope towards the lake. Lily watched as he caught up with the woman, and the two of them stood on the path talking about something. She wasn't used to the mountain path and nervously picked her way down step by step. "Lily, give me the glass." "She'll give us a little milk," called Finn while she was still some way off. Lily came to herself with a start and put the basket down on the slope before gently opening the lid and feeling around for the glass. "I'm not used to milking. I've been trying to get hold of a goat for some time, and today I finally managed to persuade an acquaintance in a farmhouse in Furuma to let me have this one," the woman said as she nervously pulled at the goat's teats. Lily watched as pure white milk spurted into the glass, filling it about halfway. "I'm sorry, that's about all I can get from it," said the woman, embarrassed. Lily thanked her and took the glass and casually went back to the basket. The woman led the goat on and went to wash her hands in the lake. Inside the basket, Robin breathed the fresh air that came flowing in and opened his eyes. With the hot, humid weather and the incessant jolting of the train, the little people had become so tired they had fallen into a deep sleep. And Robin had only just noticed now that Finn and Lily had left the train and started walking. The lid of the basket rose a fraction and Lily's hand slipped in and took the blue glass goblet. A short while after, she slipped it back half full of fresh warm milk. "Robin. Iris. Get everyone to drink it quickly, we don't have much time," she whispered urgently. Her face was smeared with soot and looked very pale. Robin hurriedly shook his parents awake, and they took turns moistening their parched throats with the most delicious milk they had tasted for a long time. "It's goat's milk," whispered Bulba. "It's frothy," added Iris. "Oh, I can feel myself coming back to life," said Fern, regaining her energy. "It's like I've been hovering between life and death all this time." They heard the sound of footsteps on dry twigs approaching, and suddenly Lily hissed. The silence of the mountainside was broken only by the cheerful chirping of a bush warbler before they heard the voice of an unknown woman ask, "Is your sister feeling a little better now?" "Lily, was the goat's milk good?" That was Finn's voice. "Very," replied Lily, and with that the basket was suddenly lifted into the air. Through the gaps in the basket, Robin could see a vast blue expanse of water. A refreshing breeze was blowing up from its surface, lightly rustling everything around them. "Well then, let's be on our way," Finn said to his sister and, hitching his rucksack higher on his shoulders, he set off. The woman and a white animal that Robin had never seen before, the goat that had just supplied their milk, followed after him. Robin's eyes grew wide as he took in the landscape around them. They were in the mountains. Green trees that Robin had never seen in his life grew thickly all around. He breathed in the invigorating smell of resin and felt as if the greenness was seeping all the way down to the bottom of his lungs. As soon as the basket began moving again, Bulba, Fern and Iris buried their faces in the towel with their eyes shut tight, but Robin kept his eyes firmly open. And for the next 2 hours he watched as they made their way along the lakeside path. The big people walked on in silence, stepping over the black earth covered in dry leaves, past all the holiday homes left empty by their foreign owners, and listening to the waves lapping at the water's edge. As the big red sun sank gradually below the far shore of the lake, Finn and Lily took their leave of the woman and her goat and turned off onto a mountain path. Soon after cutting through a larch forest, they entered the kitchen of a farmhouse filled with the fragrance of a wood fire. The little people's new home was to be a shelf near the ceiling of a room inside this straw-thatched cottage surrounded by potato fields. The evening they arrived, and for the next couple of days, they stayed in the safety of the basket with bated breath, venturing out only to fetch the milk that Lily left for them by the window. There were just two big people in this house, a woman with a no-nonsense voice and her quiet, elderly mother, with none of the rowdy children that Fern had feared might be there. She was also relieved to note that, just as in the little book room, there didn't seem to be any sign of mice, or worse, cats. That first evening Fern and Balba had been so worn out that they slept dead to the world, but on the second night Fern complained that she couldn't sleep because of the tick-tock of the big grandfather clock. The next morning Balba peeped through the cracks in the basket at the clock, which stood right before them. Goodness gracious me, I've seen a clock like that somewhere before. It was an old-fashioned grandfather clock, with the pendulum swinging in its case below the big round gold-rimmed face. Maybe it was in Miss McLaughlin's house, or was it in the Greenwood house that we saw one? He whispered to Fern. This particular clock was English-made. Tatsuo Greenwood's father had bought it long ago at an international exhibition in the Meiji period, and had grown so used to it that, when he retired here from Tokyo, he brought it with him and stood it against the wall in the living room. However, Balba and Fern couldn't possibly have seen it before. In all their 30 years in the Greenwood house, they had not once entered the living room there. Still, it makes me come over all nostalgic, it does. Just think, it must have crossed the sea sometime to reach Japan, muttered Balba fondly as he gazed at the name Birmingham at the bottom of the clock face. Robin clung onto his father's back and looked at the clock with him. Balba gestured at him to keep quiet. There was the sound of feet shuffling over the tatami towards them, and a woman opened the door to the room. A sweet old lady with white hair and a round face appeared quietly in the doorway. With her eyes still closed, she made her way over to the clock and fumbled with her hands to open the door for the pendulum case. Taking out the gold key from behind the pendulum, she began winding up the clock. Balba and Robin watched her in silence. The poor woman was blind. Robin had never seen a blind person before, and he timidly hid behind Balba's back. Once she finished winding up the clock, the old lady listened to confirm the tick-tock, then shuffled back out of the room. She's probably got sharp hearing. We must be careful not to speak in loud voices, Balba whispered to the others. Once they realized that the only big person who ever came into this room was the blind old lady, the little people were relieved. Ever since they had left the little book room, they had felt as anxious as a snail without its shell. They had always enjoyed the peace of mind afforded by the constant silence of the little book room and the fact that strangers never entered there, but in this house in the countryside they never knew when someone might come in, and they felt exposed and constantly anxious that they might be seen. On the morning of the third day, Finn came into the room with Lily, who had black bags under her eyes and was visibly thinner. "Well then, let's make the little people's new home, shall we?" said Finn brightly. Then he stepped up onto an old chest and peeked at the shelf up by the ceiling. Wow, it's covered in soot here. He lifted down the basket with Balba and the others in it and placed it on the tatami for the moment. He cleaned the shelf, then took some of his grandfather's old books and used them to block off the right corner of the shelf. Then he took a small box made of paulownia wood and a cardboard box from his grandfather's desk and put them together on the shelf to make a new house for Balba's family. "Lily, where do you want to put the blue glass goblet?" he asked his little sister. "How about by the window here?" she said, pointing at the lattice window where she had been placing the glass for the last couple of days. Hanging by the window was a sedge hat that had probably belonged to their late grandfather. If she put the glass behind it, the little people would be able to come and collect it from the end of the shelf without being seen by anybody. Finn checked the window to make sure the glass of milk couldn't fall out of it or be knocked over whenever it was opened or closed. "So, we're all set then. I'll put the chest under the window so that you can reach the sill more easily," Lily, Finn said. "The house is a bit shabby, but I think they'll be safe here." He put the little people's basket on the shelf, opened the lid and laid it on its side so they could get out easily. Well then, Hurry and finish moving while we keep watch outside the door," Lily told them, and went out of the room with Finn. The blind old lady, whom Lily called Granny Melody, was sitting on the veranda grinding some buckwheat flour in a stone mortar for Finn to take back to Tokyo with him that night. Her daughter, whom Lily called Aunt April, was Tatsuo and Joy Greenwood's cousin. She had already gone out to the mountainside fields early that morning, and so, for the first time since they had arrived at this house, Finn and Lily were at last left alone and could finish the little people's move. "You'll be starting school soon and can make new friends," said Finn, deliberately nonchalant. In reality, he knew very well that it wouldn't be easy for Lily to fit in with life here in the countryside. Little Lily's arrival at the home of the two women, with no man about the house, simply meant another mouth to feed in a household where food was already in pitifully short supply. It wasn't just the food. Collecting firewood, drawing water from the well, everything had to include one more person, and April had explained to Finn. Although she was about the same age as Finn's and Lily's parents, her hair was completely white and her front teeth were missing, and she looked much older than her years. In Tokyo, even though everything was in short supply, Joy could still sometimes get hold of butter or sugar, and they at least could scrape by. But here in the countryside, they had to do all the work themselves just to eke out what in Tokyo were considered the basics. There was very little to eat other than rice and potato porridge, or boiled barley and rice, and Aunt April had to work hard just to produce that much. Even Granny Melody toiled the whole day grinding up flour and twisting straw into rope. Lily wouldn't be able to lead the pampered life of a city child here. "The powdered milk won't last until winter," said Lily, worried as usual about the little people. "I wonder if I'll be able to get that woman with the goat to give me some milk?" "That goat doesn't just belong to her, you know," Finn replied. "She shares it with some friends. I went to see her yesterday, thinking she might let you have some milk. She's called Victoria, by the way, and she lives in a village called Hondo. She used to come to Nigiri every summer with other women in her working women's club, and 5 or 6 of them were evacuated here in the spring of 1943 and are running a proper farm. They said that after the snow melted this spring they plowed the fields and planted rice for the first time." "Is that far from here?" Lily asked, listening to the faint rustling of the little people as they moved their belongings into their new home. "If you carry on past your school and walk about an hour up the valley, you'll come to a secluded village with about 5 or 6 houses. That's where they live. In the busy farming season they run a creche and a club for children, and put on kamishibai picture card plays like, 'Let's be sure to put away our bedding,' and 'Let's be sure to dry the chopping board,' and try really hard to make themselves useful to local people." Finn suddenly stood up and took out a small wrap of paper from the rucksack he had brought with him. "Lily, I bought this in Tokyo for you. Look, it's sparklers. When I went to the toy shop this was all they had left. I was thinking we could enjoy them together when I leave tonight, but let's keep half of them for those women. They could probably use things like this for their children's club." Lily suddenly remembered that her brother was about to leave, and couldn't answer right away. Finn pressed the packet of sparklers into her hand and went out into the garden where Granny Melody sat on the sunny veranda grinding flour. "Before I leave I'm going to the mountains to collect your share of firewood for the coming winter, Lily." "Wait. Take me with you. Even I can carry firewood." Lily checked that the little people were settled in on the shelf, then followed Finn outside. A day of grass cutting. After Finn's departure, Aunt April's house in the shade of the forest returned to its customary silence. Every day, Lily followed her hard-working aunt into the mountains to collect firewood. She got her to help secure the heavy bundle to her back, and then, as she came back down the mountain path, her light body gained momentum, and she was able to descend the slope in one go. On the way her knees wobbled and chest pounded, and she thought she would never make it, but she was surprised that her strength held up all the way to the bottom. Aunt April realized that the reason city-bred Lily was following her around all day was probably that she was missing her mother, and didn't let on how much of a burden she was to her. But the truth was that Lily was too frightened of Granny Melody to stay at home with her all day. She felt sorry for the old woman being blind, but she just couldn't help being scared of her. The empty farmhouse was dark even in the afternoon, and when the quiet old woman stood in silence by the sunken hearth, Lily felt all the hairs rise up on the nape of her neck. However wrong she knew she was, being alone in that house where the sun barely reached filled her with indescribable terror. From time to time, a letter from Joy in Tokyo would arrive in a long white envelope. In her replies, Lily would criticize herself for being scared of Granny Melody. She knew that her mother would probably take Granny Melody to a sunny spot outside, or into the pleasant woods, and sit her where there was plentiful fresh air, but the moment she herself tried approaching the unseeing old woman, she would flinch and back away again. September came round and Lily started attending the school by the lake. It took her about 20 minutes to get there on foot. She couldn't help feeling relieved at being able to get away from the two women during the day, and while some of the children at school bullied her for being the pale kid or the evacuee, others were exceptionally kind to her. 2 days every week the children from her school would do voluntary work at various farms in the area. At the beginning of September, the younger children, like Lily, were set to cutting grass. The farm kids brought their own sickles that they had sharpened themselves, while Lily and some others had to borrow theirs from the school. They would each hoist a wooden frame onto their back and set off for the farm. Lily looked forward to the grass cutting. She was always thinking that in order to find milk for Bulba and his family, she had to get to know farmers who kept a cow or a goat. Also, whenever they went grass cutting, they would always receive some treat from the farmhouse: steamed buns containing wheat bran, or freshly steamed sweet potatoes. In Aunt April's house they ate whatever they had available, and when there was, say, pumpkin, then they would have pumpkin for dinner several days running. However, the better-off farmhouses liked to treat the pupils who went to work for them. "Your Korean shoes are great," a big boy called Ethan told Lily. This was what the village kids called the simple rubber plimsolls that fit on either foot, which school children in Tokyo were given on rations. Lily compared her friend's large, sunburnt feet in straw sandals with her own narrow feet in plimsolls and laughed. That morning, they were going to work for a farmer called Shorman in Hondo. By September, Nigiri was already well into autumn. The ripples on the blue lake sparkled, while Mounts Kuroheim and Izuna looked close in the crisp air and golden light. Recalling that Hondo was the name of the village where Finn had told her Victoria was living, Lily looked forward even more than usual to the grass cutting. As they climbed up the mountain path, Lily turned round again and again to gaze at the lake. She looked so cheerful that Ethan, the boy who had teased her about her plimsolls earlier, felt half relieved and half sorrowful. Last month he had heard that a girl evacuee was in April Greenwood's house, and so he had gone to see for himself. When he reached the pass overlooking the lake, thunderclouds billowing up over Mount Kuroheim were surrounded by smaller puffs of cloud that looked like a shoal of goldfish, dyed red by the setting sun. A little girl was crouched there on a stone gazing in silence at the sunset. She looked frail and reminded him of a newly hatched pond smelt. Tears were streaming down her face, and he had the impression she had been saving them up for when no one else was around to see them. He was struck by how much this little girl from Tokyo must miss her mother. Suddenly he, too, had felt the urge to cry and, careful not to make a sound stepping over the dry twigs, he turned to go back home. He had assumed that the little girl would be entering year 1, and was half annoyed and half amused when Lily Greenwood joined his year 3 class in the new term. He teased her more than anyone else did, and was sometimes nasty to her too, but he felt somehow relieved to see the cheerful smile on her face, now suntanned so that she was no longer the pale kid. After climbing over several hills, Lily and her classmates finally gazed down upon Hondo, a cluster of straw-thatched cottages huddled in amongst the paddies of ripening yellow rice. They spread out over the mountainside and began cutting the grass. A strong herbal fragrance of mountain and pampas grasses wafted up around them. But however hard Lily worked, her pile of cut grass was never as high as the other children's. Once Ethan and Keiko had finished their own spots, they went over to help her, rapidly bringing her pile up to size. At last the children piled the cut grass onto the wooden frames they carried on their backs and made their way down the steep path in single file, Lily's head bobbing as she ran to keep up with them. Once they gained momentum, it was impossible to stop, however tough it was to keep going, and Lily was thankful for her Korean shoes, which really helped to protect her feet from stones and tree roots. Upon reaching the Shoreman's house, they were met by 5 or 6 women who took the cut grass from them and stored it away inside a big barn. Just like on the other farms in the area, all the young men had gone off to war. As the children rested in the garden by the veranda, the women brought out some paper-wrapped boxes for them. They looked just like the box of sweets that Lily was given at the inaugural ceremony at her primary school. At most farmhouses, the children were given steamed buns or sweet potatoes as they were, not in any wrapping, so these boxes were quite unusual. And among the women, Lily recognized Victoria. "Oh wow, it's white bread. It's sweet." Unlike the girls, who were rather shy, Ethan and the other boys immediately ripped off the paper and began eating. Each package contained steamed buns made with goat's milk and sweets shaped like camellia flowers made from steamed sweet potatoes. When Lily opened up her package and saw the pinkish flower-shaped sweets inside, her eyes suddenly felt hot. Without realizing it, this was just what she had been craving, and now it was suddenly there before her. After the food shortages began, for birthdays and special occasions, her mother Joy would squeeze sweet potato pulp through a cloth to form flower-shaped sweets for her. In Aunt April's household, however, they were all far too busy to do anything like that. However dull the food was in Tokyo, Lily's mother had always made an effort to make it as tasty as possible. A silent tear dropped onto the pink camellia in her hands. "Tasty, eh? The lasses from Tokyo made them for us," old Grandpa Shoreman told the children, who had fallen quiet when they saw this unusual food. Local people didn't have much good to say about Grandpa Shoreman, who rented out the fields to the young women evacuees, but he clearly enjoyed surprising the village kids with such unusual handmade delicacies. Lily slowly savored the tasty treats and ate just one of the steamed goat's milk buns. She decided to take the flower-shaped sweet back for Granny Melody and the other steamed bun to Balba and his family. As the school party got ready to go back home, Victoria came up to Lily. "You're Greenwood's little sister, right? How is your brother?" Lily nodded, saying nothing. She hadn't received any letter from Finn, but she'd just recently had a letter from Joy telling her that he was doing fine in Kyoto. "Have you got used to school now? Your brother was really worried about you, you know." In the end, Lily said goodbye to Victoria without telling her that she had some sparklers from Finn for her, or asking if she could come and get some milk from her from time to time. On the way back, the children couldn't resist taking out the remaining white buns and flower-shaped sweets from the parcels and eating them all up. The young woman teacher with them pretended not to notice. Lily was determined not to eat the contents of her package that she had saved for the others at home. But she hadn't tasted milk for so long, and her resolve began to weaken. She resisted the temptation longer than most, but eventually she gave in and ate the flower sweet. And just as they were getting close to school and the blue lake came into view, she ate the milk bun that she had been saving for the little people. In the little people's home, Fern was hurriedly doing some needlework as she listened to the tick-tock of the old grandfather clock. The mountain air was growing cold, and even wearing all their clothes, they still felt the chill. "It's going to be terribly cold this winter. I can feel it in my knees," said Balba, looking worried. "That's why I'm making you another quilt." Fern had opened out the roll of fabric scraps she'd brought from Tokyo and was using them to stitch together a patchwork quilt cover. "Mother, do you need some thistledown?" asked Robin at her side, his tone implying that she obviously needed some padding for the quilt. Fern glanced up at Balba. They were both still hesitant to let their young son venture outside in this unknown land. A turtle dove started up a low cooing in the nearby forest. "It's all right, you know. Let me go out. I won't be seen or caught or anything like that," said Robin, full of confidence. The truth was, he had already been outside twice, slipping down a spider's silk rope made by Iris that he'd tied to the lattice window. There was a pile of dried leaves beneath the window, so even if he fell he would land safely. And it was around the back of the house, where Aunt April never came. "I wonder how Arlo is," asked Iris. She was helping to stitch together the patchwork quilt cover. "Come to think of it, Robin, we really must ask Lily to tie the marker ribbon on a tree so he can find us." Robin gave up on going outside that day and retreated to the corner where he had his big book. That evening, Lily arrived back home with a mixture of happiness and sadness on her face. As soon as she could, she went into the little people's room carrying a small chipped bowl wrapped in a handkerchief and poured its contents into the blue glass goblet behind the old sedge hat by the lattice window. That night, for the first time in a long while, the Ash family could drink real goat's milk instead of the normal powdered milk. And when Lily went as usual to collect the empty glass, she found next to it a small slip of paper. It was good quality paper torn from a notebook, and on it were written some small, neat letters in pencil. It looked like Robin's writing. "A ribbon for our friend the pigeon, please. At top of tall tree, please. We'll put here tomorrow. And thanks for nice milk. R." It was the first time she had ever received a letter from the little people, and it set her heart racing. But what could they mean by a ribbon for our friend the pigeon? She tore a page out of her school book and wrote a reply. "A friend at school gave me the goat's milk. He's called Ethan. What is a ribbon for our friend the pigeon? If it's something I can do, I'll be happy to do it." She folded up the note and left it below the sedge hat. Earlier, Ethan had made her cry and had given her the milk to make up for it. She had been thoroughly ashamed of herself for giving in to her own greediness and eating the treats that she had been saving for everyone at home, and was feeling quite miserable when Ethan had come hurtling down the slope and crashed right into her. "Ship sunk. Ship sunk. The enemy ship Pale Child of the East has been sunk in the Southern Sea," he'd yelled, mimicking the imperial announcements broadcast on the radio. When he heard the chorus of his friends' reproachful voices, though, he quickly came back to the site of the sinking to find Lily crouched on the path crying, her shoulders shaking. She was always so cheerful and smiling at school that the village children were quite taken aback at seeing her cry for the first time. By the time they reached the school, she had already dried her tears and just sat in the classroom in a daze, all alone and not talking to anyone. After school, Ethan had been waiting for her on the path home and asked her if there was anything she wanted, and she'd said distractedly that she wanted some goat's milk. He told her to wait, and soon came back with a chipped red bowl half full of milk. He lived in a big farmhouse where they had a goat, he told her, and also that he hated goat's milk, but if she liked it he could bring her more so she should drink it up right away. Lily couldn't explain to her rough-and-tumble friend that he wasn't the only reason she had burst into tears. She spread out her handkerchief and carefully wrapped the bowl in it. "Thank you," she said, then set off up the path for home. That night Lily was so worn out from the grass cutting and dinner was so late that she dozed off right afterwards. Normally Aunt April would have woken her up and made her lay out her bedding properly, but on the way home from the fields she had heard about how that rascal Ethan had made her cry. So for once she pretended not to notice when Granny Melody laid out the bedding for her. And she herself picked Lily up and gently laid her down under the quilt that her mother Joy had made for her. A new friend. The next morning before school, Lily peeked under the sedge hat. There, like a snake's cast-off skin, was a long, fluffy, rainbow-colored ribbon neatly folded up on the windowsill. And, like yesterday, there was also a scrap of paper torn from a notebook. Lily hurriedly took her handkerchief out of the pocket of her baggy work trousers and folded the ribbon inside it. Then she picked up Robin's letter and set off up the hill for school. Once she reached the pass overlooking the lake, she squatted down by her usual rock and unfolded the little scrap of paper to read it. "Arlo the pigeon is from Tokyo. He is coming to look for us. We tied a ribbon like this to his foot. Please tie it to the top of a tree." Lily smiled to herself, imagining little Robin hugging a big pencil as he wrote this note. "I'm sorry, yesterday I ate the gift I was going to give you. But I found out that Ethan's got a goat. I'll make friends with him and get lots of milk for you. And I'll get him to tie this ribbon on a tree for you too." Lily skipped lightly along the path to school. Just after lunch, Robin heard footsteps in the back garden. He picked up Iris's rope and slipped out of their home on the shelf and down to the lattice window. Bulba and Fern were sleeping, wrapped up in their blanket and quilt, and so Iris came with him. The pair peered out into the garden, which was bathed in the bright afternoon light of autumn. The footsteps belonged to Lily and a burly village boy dressed in long trousers. The two children were standing in the garden looking up at the larch forest and eagerly discussing something together. They're looking for a tree they can tie the ribbon to, Robin whispered to Iris. The boy pointed to the tallest larch tree and said something. Lily nodded and handed him the sparkling ribbon. The boy scooted up the tree in no time at all and tied the ribbon to a nail-bitingly high branch. Down below, Lily clapped her hands in delight. Lily! Lily! Came Granny Melody's voice. Lily tensed and called back yes. The kitchen door opened, and Granny Melody came shuffling out into the back garden. Lily, who is that over there? Her aunt asked. It's my friend Ethan from school. He found a woodpecker's nest in the tree. The woodpecker made a round hole in the trunk, Lily answered with difficulty. Granny Melody's white hair fluttered in the autumn breeze. Stop playing such dangerous games, she said, and went back into the house as steadily as any seeing person. Up in the tree, Ethan laughed, but Lily stared at the kitchen door through which Granny Melody had disappeared as if deep in thought. Eventually, Ethan came down from the tree and shook her out of her daze, and the pair disappeared from sight. Robin and Iris stood by the window looking up at the ribbon in the tree. If it was seen by someone who didn't know any better, it might look a bit like a tangled spider's web or a bit of rubbish. But to Robin and Iris, the ribbon sparkled and shone just like a rainbow. If Arlo came this way, surely he would see the ribbon gleaming there and be able to find them. For the first time since coming to Najeri, Iris looked reassured. Robin, let's go outside and find some dandelion down for Father's quilt. Treading softly, Iris went back up to the shelf to get her bag, the same shoulder bag that Robin had used to collect acorns outside the Greenwood's house back in Tokyo. The wall outside the lattice window had a rough coat of plaster, making it easy for Robin and Iris to get safely down the rope. The ground in the back garden was strewn with fallen leaves that rustled under their feet. They tied themselves together with rope and wandered around looking for dandelion down, but it was September and it had all blown away in the breeze by now. Treading softly, they made their way over to the inviting freshness of the larch forest. Some bird feathers floated lightly around them. Robin strained his eyes and stared into the shade of the forest. The rays of sunlight filtering down through the branches flickered on the ground, where something that looked like a small whirlwind was spinning round and round. The bird feathers were being whipped up by this wind. Bird feathers would be okay for the quilt, wouldn't they? Robin whispered to his sister and bounded off towards the whirlwind. Arg! Screamed Iris as the rope tying them together pulled taut and dragged her with him. Coming to an abrupt halt, Robin found himself face to face with a strange little fellow. The two stared at each other for a while, then burst out laughing. In a voice that sounded like the rustling of dried leaves, the fellow said, I do believe I've come across something strange, Robin gulped. And there I was thinking you might be able to speak. The barefoot, sunburnt little fellow cheerfully opened his eyes wide. Are you after my feathers, young man? He added, eyeing Robin sternly. Iris went quietly up to him and spoke gently. Hello. I'm Iris, and this is my little brother Robin. The little fellow went a bit pink and then said to Iris, I don't have no name. Some might call me Puck, though, I suppose. Iris and Robin looked at each other. You're wondering why I'm not surprised to see you. Aren't you now? Puck said in his hoarse voice. He seemed to be enjoying staying one hop, skip and jump ahead of them, and saying exactly what they had indeed been thinking. Yes, we were. It's really strange, answered Iris seriously. Why aren't you surprised? Have you seen people like us before? Puck laughed teasingly and began dancing around them like a little whirlwind. Robin was getting annoyed. He shook off Iris's hand and tried to catch him, but with a whistling kind of laugh, the little whirlwind blew up dried leaves from the ground and disappeared off into the forest. Robin and Iris exchanged another look, then called out after him, Hey! Hey, come back! Puck! Hey, come back! Puck! Came back a faint voice from the edge of the forest, after which they heard nothing at all other than the calls of the coal tits and doves. Iris and Robin stood stupefied there by the forest. At their feet, soft white feathers danced round and round and round. Iris squatted down and began collecting up the feathers and putting them in her bag. Iris, don't do that. Don't you think they're a bit weird? No, not at all. They're a gift to us from that Puck. He knows we're looking for something to stuff a quilt with, said Iris and carried on gathering them up. Wasn't he rude, spinning around us like that? Robin was still in a huff. Having picked up the last of the feathers, Iris laughed. Robin, today's a really good day. Think about it. We finally put the ribbon marker up for Arlo, and we discovered that another little person other than us is living here, and on top of that we got some feathers for the quilt, didn't we? But the only point on which Robin agreed with his sister was that they should keep everything about today secret from their mother, and he remained in a sulky silence all the way back to their home on the shelf. Meanwhile, Lily had been helping Ethan cut grass near his home. No men were left in his house, and Ethan, his elder brothers, one in middle school and the other in his last year of primary school, assisted his mother with the farm work. Lily had come to help in exchange for some goat's milk. There was a good view of the lake from Ethan's house. Lily, have you ever been to that island there? It's called Benton Island, Ethan asked her. Lily told him how she had planned to get her brother Finn to take her there, but in the end they hadn't been able to go. It's great that your big brother is still alive, Lily. My big brother died in battle in Borneo, said Ethan with a sigh as he swished the cutter through the grass. My dad died before that in northern China, so my family's honored for its war dead. Shocked, Lily didn't say anything. That's why we need to grow up quickly, join the army, and avenge our father and brother. Isn't your brother joining up, Lily? Lily thought as hard as she could, then told her friend that her brother Shin was going to the military preparatory school next year. Ethan sighed and said enviously, "He's so lucky. I'm not clever enough to do that." Ethan's trust in Lily seemed to have grown after she told him about Shin, and he cut grass all the more quickly. Lily had been wondering whether or not she should tell this new friend of hers about the little people, but now she decided to keep quiet about them. He would probably say she was being a traitor, the same as Shin had. There were certain things that other people could never understand, and she was glad she hadn't told Ethan that the ribbon she got him to tie on the tree was a marker to help a pigeon find his friends. The two of them carried on cutting grass until their wooden frames were filled to overflowing, and then went back to Ethan's house. The evening sun set surprisingly fast in the mountains, and all of a sudden it was dark. When they reached the house, in the dim interior they could just make out Ethan's mother and elder sister kindling the fire in the cooking stove, while his brothers were already seated beside the sunken hearth. The harmonious sounds of family wafted out of the house to where they stood outside. Their father may have died in northern China and their elder brother in Borneo, but the remaining family members seemed to get on well. Standing outside waiting for Ethan, Lily gazed rapturously at the cozy scene inside, which seemed to her to shine like one single, happy lamp. Ethan came round from the back of the house and called, "Lily, where are you?" Then he caught sight of her lonely figure gazing into the house. He pressed a warm bottle into her hands. "Lily, come and cut grass for our goat again, all right? Shall I come some of the way back with you?" Lily said there was no need, but he followed her up the mountain path anyway. When you walk along this path at night, you shouldn't look down. As long as you look up as you walk, you'll find your way okay. She did as she was told, and saw that the tops of the dense, dark trees divided in two where the paths diverged. And 2 or 3 stars were twinkling brightly in the night sky, where the last of the daylight still lingered. "Thank you, Ethan. I'll be okay from here." Still looking up at the sky, Lily ran quickly down the slope. She could hear him singing a patriotic march as he went back down the path to his house. That night, the little people again found the blue glass goblet full to the brim of real goat's milk. It was such a treat to have some fresh milk when they had grown so used to that watery concoction of powdered milk. In the dim light, Fern began making some cheese to keep for emergencies. She caught sight of Iris, slipping the bird feathers into the quilt cover, but she didn't scold her. The first snow. By the time November came around, winter had settled over Najeri. Upon waking in the morning, Lily could see her breath even inside the house, and she found it really hard to get out of bed. It felt as though her back, still heavy with fatigue, was stuck to the warm mattress, and it took all her courage to tear it away and venture out into the piercing cold. The leaves had fallen from the trees in the larch forest, and the peaks on the far side of the lake had already started turning white in October. 3 mountains in a row, all different heights, were slightly different shades of white, the northernmost, Mount Myoko, being the whitest, followed by Mounts Kuroheim then Izuna, sparkling below the blue sky. A letter arrived regularly every week from Lily's mother, Joy. She was always worried about Lily's health. And it was through these letters that Lily learned about what was happening far away in Tokyo, such as the fact that her father had not yet returned home. Her brother Shin got up at 5 o'clock every morning to go to kendo practice, and they had harvested 5 cans of sweet potatoes from their garden vegetable patch that autumn. Lily also wrote long letters in pencil to her mother. She told Mother everything, from how Aunt April's rice crop had been safely harvested, to how the little people were waiting for Arlo to arrive from Tokyo, and the time she'd been mushroom picking with her friend Ethan. In reply to Lily's question, Joy wrote that no pigeons came to the Greenwood's garden in Tokyo anymore. She seemed to have taken a shine to Ethan, for she often mentioned him in her letters. And so Lily often wrote back to her about her rough-and-tumble classmate. Meanwhile, the little people were each making their own preparations for winter. Balba had started grinding acorn flour, as he had done in Tokyo. Fern got Iris to help her make 2 more quilts with the feathers that Puck left for them every time he turned up in a whirlwind of dried leaves. Robin was determined to catch him, but the little imp was always one step ahead. Iris couldn't bear the thought of him shivering in the wintry winds that blew through the mountains, and so she unpicked her own chilly red sweater and used the wool to knit a cute waistcoat for him. One day they heard his hoarse voice like the rustle of dried leaves calling them from the back garden. Iris. Robin. Iris picked up the finished waistcoat and slipped quietly down from the shelf. Robin followed after his sister. Now the leaves had fallen, the larch forest felt unusually spacious and light. Iris gazed into the thick of the trees and exchanged a glance with Robin. A strange squirrel-like creature was dancing round and round and round in there. It was about the same size as Puck and was on all fours. Iris stepped back in fright as the squirrel fur split open and the sunburnt face of that little imp popped out with a big grin on his face. Iris, I scared you. Puck laughed merrily. Yes, you did. You're a naughty boy, really. Iris scolded him, hiding the red waistcoat behind her back. Puck opened his eyes wide. Then he said seriously, You're hiding something from me, aren't you? Yes. But you've got a magnificent fur coat, haven't you? She said primly. It's for you. You'll ne'er get through the winter without one of these air coats. He slipped nimbly out of the skin. Underneath it, he was wearing another one. Look, 1 fair Balba, 1 fair Fern, and 1 fair Iris. And last of all, 1 fair Robin, he chanted in a sing-song voice, slipping out of yet more skins and throwing them onto the dry leaves on the ground. Underneath, he was completely naked and looked tiny. Robin, I betcha you won't wear something I made, he added sarcastically, while trying to sneak a glimpse of what was behind Iris's back. Iris flushed red. She had felt sorry for Puck looking so scruffy, and that's why she'd knitted the waistcoat for him, but who was she to be meddling in his life? He was an independent free spirit, a loner who didn't need anyone's sympathy. Puck was staring at her with his piercing eyes. Then he let out a loud whoop and started dancing around. A waistcoat. A waistcoat for me. She made me a waistcoat. I won't be naked anymore. Iris threw the waistcoat at the little imp dancing around her. He caught it and, still prancing around, put his arms through it. A waistcoat for me. A waistcoat for me. She made me a waistcoat. I won't be naked anymore. He looked like a fire spirit, prancing around in the forest in his bright red waistcoat. Iris picked up a squirrel skin from the ground and pulled it over her shoulders. She wondered who had made these coats. They even had a worm hood on them. Ho ho, Puck said, and whirling crazily around, he disappeared off into the forest. Watching him go, Iris said to Robin, I wonder why he's being so kind to us? If it wasn't for him, we would probably freeze to death. Without a word, Robin picked up the remaining 3 skins off the ground. It was extremely annoying, but he had to admit she was right. But what the heck is he? One of these days I'll work him out, you mark my words, he thought to himself, glancing back at the forest as he followed after Iris, carrying the fluffy, heavy furs. One day, Lily was in the forest on the way to Hondo when she thought she could hear her brother Finn's voice. It was mid-November, about a week after the anniversary of Emperor Meiji's birthday. She and Ethan had come to the chestnut groves on the way home from school. A fierce wind had been blowing as dawn broke, and Ethan said they'd be able to collect lots of fallen chestnuts. And there were indeed plenty of the brown burrs on the ground beneath the low trees. Ethan adroitly split them open and took out the glossy nuts. However careful Lily was, though, her hands kept getting pricked. Ow! She gave up using her hands and instead gingerly stepped on them to split them open before carefully taking them out. Hey, your Korean shoes are strong, Lily? Ethan laughed, looking at her feet. Just then they heard a voice coming along the path, a young man's voice. Lily pricked up her ears. That crisp Tokyo accent sounded just like Finn. Ethan also heard it, and both of them strained to hear more. Then they heard a woman's voice. The two people seemed to be arguing about something as they walked. Lily and Ethan stuffed the chestnuts into the bags they had brought with them and crept out of the grove. The people were walking along the path ahead of them. Finn. Lily could hardly believe her eyes and for a while just stared at their backs. Then with a loud cry she went bounding down the path. Finn. Finn. The man wheeled round. It was Finn. Lily flew into her brother's bear hug. Why did you come without telling me? Lily wanted to reproach him, but, held tight in her beloved brother's arms, she couldn't speak. She buried her head in his warm chest and wept big tears. Lily, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to surprise you like this. Stop crying now. Everyone will laugh at you, you know. Finn told her, jogging her in his arms. Lily suddenly remembered that he was with that woman Victoria and hurriedly extracted herself from his arms. Have you been out gathering chestnuts? When I arrived this morning you'd already left for school, he said, as if excusing himself. Lily couldn't bear the thought that her own brother had gone to see Victoria before her. Victoria was standing on the side of the path with a serious look on her face, impatiently waiting to continue the conversation. Lily picked up her bag of chestnuts and looked around for Ethan. He was crouching amidst the ears of pampas grass a little up ahead, watching them with his black eyes. She went and joined him, and the pair walked on ahead of Finn, kicking the flat pebbles on the path. That evening they enjoyed a cheerful dinner with Aunt April's delicious chestnut rice, which she made to go with the canned salmon that Finn had brought from Tokyo. Finn had also brought a can of milk for Balba and his family, which he gave to Lily out of sight of the two women. Finn had become so thin since his last visit in August that Aunt April barely recognized him, and she urged him to eat more. No thanks, I don't want to get fat, muttered Finn jokingly. Aunt April retorted incredulously, you don't want to get fat at your age? Just when everyone's building up their strength for the sake of our country. Finn laughed and said, our country? It's good to be able to believe in it. Shin's getting up at 5 every morning to go to kendo practice, you know. Aunt April looked at Finn suspiciously. You're like Drake, aren't you? If you're not careful, you'll end up like him. Granny Melody tugged at her sleeve and she clamped her mouth shut. Watching the shadows playing over Finn's thin face in the light from the hearth, Lily felt scared. As they'd made their way home through the sea of white tufts of pampas grass that afternoon, Lily hadn't completely understood what Victoria and Finn had been talking about, but it was something terrible that she'd never heard about in school or in her aunt's house. All the men are laying down their lives for the sake of our country without complaining, aren't they? So we women want to do something for the sake of our country too, you know. While you unwittingly sacrifice yourselves like that, there are people profiting from this war. My father was taken away from us just for always saying how stupid this war is, because in our country we aren't allowed to criticize people in authority. Lily didn't hear Victoria's reply, but after that the two of them had fallen into a chilly silence as they walked along the mountain path through the swaying pampas grass. Seeing Finn's face looking just like it had that afternoon, Lily felt afraid. She stood by the hearth adding kindling to the fire, making bright flames shoot up. Lily, you've really become a Nigeri kid, haven't you? Tending the fire's second nature to you now, said Finn, changing the subject. Just then the grandfather clock in the other room sleepily chimed 8. Well then, Lily, time for bed. I expect you're looking forward to having Finn sleep with you again after so long, said Granny Melody. Lily stood up and went to lay out the bedding for her and Finn in the other room. The next afternoon Finn took Lily to Benton, the island she saw every day. He had borrowed a boat from one of Aunt April's acquaintances on the lakeside and rowed smoothly across the water. The breeze on the lake was icy, and Lily felt her cheeks would freeze. Finn told Lily how beautiful the autumn colors were at Kokedara, the famous moss temple in Kyoto. Here on Benton, cedar trees grew thickly around them, and moss-covered steps led all the way up to the top of the mountain. When they reached the small shrine on the summit, Lily put her hands together and prayed to the goddess Benton. "Please let me go back to Tokyo soon. And please let Daddy come home soon. And please make Finn healthy again." Finn took a picture of her standing under the trees by the shrine. And then she adjusted the focus and took a picture of him in return. Seeing him through the viewfinder, she thought he looked terribly lonely and wondered if perhaps Victoria was supposed to have come with them today. They crossed back over the clear waters of the lake to the landing place right below Lily's school. People were casting them disapproving glances. A little evacuee and her camera-toting brother going on a boat trip at a time like this must have seemed awfully frivolous to them. The evening Finn was to leave, the first snow of winter fell in Nigeri. Lily went to see him off, but he left her at the rock on the pass and went on alone. Aunt April and Granny Melody had filled his big rucksack with treats like azuki beans, apples, and buckwheat flour for him to take back to Tokyo, and the straps dug into his thin shoulders under the weight. "Goodbye. Goodbye," Finn called out at the top of his lungs, then disappeared into the dark forest. The trees stood out starkly against the snow, giving the scene the effect of an ink painting. The fluffy snowflakes landed on Lily's hood and eyelashes and melted as she made her way back down the mountain path alone. The snow was like a living creature, hissing as it fell, and erased the footprints she and Finn had left earlier. Arlo and Puck. The frequent snowfalls soon covered Lily's house and surroundings in a mantle of white, and at about the same time everyone around her too began behaving coldly towards her. After Finn's second visit at school and the neighboring houses around the mountainside, people's attitude towards her started changing, although she didn't notice anything amiss to begin with. One day she stopped by Ethan's house on the way home. Ethan was always so healthy, but she hadn't seen him at school for 2 or 3 days, and so she went to find out how he was. Wearing the warm snow boots Granny Melody had woven out of straw for her, she climbed up the path leading to his house. In the fresh snow at the side of the trail were some cute little tracks left by birds. It looked as if the birds had enjoyed a stroll in the snow, and she was reminded of the footprints left by Iris and Robin. Standing sedately in the shade of the trees blanketed by snow, Ethan's farmhouse looked like a scene on a chocolate box. Lily peered through the open kitchen door to its dark interior and called, "Hello. Ethan, are you there?" Ethan's mother rose from her place by the bright fire in the hearth. "Hello, is Ethan sick?" Lily asked her. Ethan's mother looked Lily up and down suspiciously. She seemed like a completely different person to the kindly woman who had given Lily some freshly picked persimmons the last time she'd been over. "I'm Ethan's classmate. He hasn't been at school, so," Lily added hurriedly, thinking maybe she had forgotten who she was. "Ethan's got a cold and is in bed with a fever all right," the mother said irritably, looking at Lily's worried face. "You're that Greenwood girl who evacuated from Tokyo, aren't you? So where's your father then?" Lily looked at her in surprise. This was the first time she'd ever been asked about her father since coming to Nigeri. "My father's in Tokyo." "Is he now?" "Well, I don't suppose you'll tell me where in Tokyo he is." She gave the kitchen door a rough shake with her big hands, as if warning a repulsive child to go away and stay away. Lily chewed at her thumbnail so hard it hurt and, trying to ignore her mocking tone, did her best to keep her pale face composed. "Please tell Ethan I hope he gets better soon." She had done her best to sound as placatory as possible, but Ethan's mother slammed the door shut in her face and said from the other side, "Ethan won't be playing with you anymore. We're a respectable family with honorable war dead here. I won't let any son of mine play with the child of a traitor." Lily straightened her shoulders and set off back along the snowy path. "If you hold your head up as you walk, you'll find the sky is lighter along the path," Ethan had once told her, and that's what she did now. Above the bare branches of the trees, the sky was bright blue. Did Ethan hear what Finn and Victoria were talking about? I was scared listening to them, but could he really have understood them? Her head burned as she tried hard to think. Mummy told me that Daddy was taken to that place by mistake. Shin said he was taken there because he was bad, but I believe Mummy. There's no way Daddy can be a traitor, not with the way he smiled at me so gently in that place. But if he is a traitor, that means Finn is also, and maybe me too. The mountain path that day had appeared to be deserted, and Lily couldn't have known that some villagers had been working nearby and overheard every word of Finn and Victoria's conversation. They had been scandalized by his being out enjoying a walk together with a girl at such a critical time, and the fact that on top of that he was saying bad things about the army and the war just inflamed their antipathy all the more. Rumors about him had spread like wildfire throughout the area, and even those who had known about Drake Greenwood, but had kept quiet about him until now nodded knowingly and said, like father, like son, and began falling over each other to tell everyone everything they knew about the Greenwood family. And Ethan's mother, too, had been horrified to hear that the polite little evacuee's father was a traitor and in prison. Lily ran down the rest of the path as if trying to shake off something unpleasant and arrived back at Aunt April's house. When she took off her red gloves, she noticed a blood blister in the shape of a tooth under the nail of her right thumb, and the thumb throbbed painfully. But she didn't say anything. As always, she made up some powdered milk for Bulba and his family, and the blue glass goblet soothed her aching heart. One day you'll be able to live together with your father and the rest of your family again, it seemed to be telling her. What will I do if Ethan won't play with me anymore? He's been so nice. If he starts being nasty to me, everyone at school will start bullying me, she thought as she placed the milk for the little people by the window, then went back to the kitchen. But in her heart of hearts, she could hear a little voice whisper, "It'll be all right, Lily. Don't let it get you down." She thought it sounded like her mother Joy's voice. Or it might have been Fern. That's right. I'll never give in, she said to herself and, before being told by Aunt April, went out to the shed to get some kindling to light the fire in the hearth. Ethan was lying in another room when he thought he heard Lily call out to him. "Mama, did someone come over just now?" he asked in a rasping voice from under a pile of bedding. "No, nobody. I just closed the kitchen door because it's getting cold," she answered sullenly from the kitchen. Unconvinced, Ethan persisted, "But I heard you saying I couldn't play with someone. Who can't I play with?" "That evacuee girl you're always hanging around with," she spat back at him. "Your big brother says her father is a traitor and in prison, you know. I'm not having you play with someone like that." Ethan didn't answer. An image of Lily's white face appeared in his still feverish mind. He just couldn't reconcile that terrible word prison with the sight of her weeping in the sunset. He'd heard his brother saying bad things about Lily's big brother too, but he hadn't seemed at all like a traitor when he'd met him on the mountain path, although he had looked terribly thin and serious. Then something occurred to him. She said her other brother is at military prep school, didn't she? So he can't be a traitor. And she isn't either, he muttered to himself. I will play with her. This made him feel much better, and he fell fast asleep. That night, in the little people's house, Bulba and Fern spread Lily's blanket from the basket on the floor like a carpet and wrapped themselves up in all the bedding they had, but even so they lay awake shivering. Iris and Robin were wearing the squirrel skins and sleeping peacefully with just their usual bedding to cover them. The children have been going outside again, haven't they? Fern whispered to Bulba. No, I'm not going to stop them. Seeing them coming home with glowing cheeks, I can well imagine how much fun they're having out there. As Bulba didn't answer, she continued, on the other hand, did you see Lily's face this evening? I felt so terribly sorry for her that I couldn't help telling her, don't let it get you down. That child is holding back on something. Maybe something terrible is starting again. Bulba cleared his throat and said, stop talking and go to sleep. It's snowing again. That's what it sounds like anyway. In the dark they could hear the rustle of freezing snow landing on the thatched roof. The old wooden ceiling creaked as it, too, froze. I wonder how things are in Tokyo now? Perhaps we shouldn't have run away here to such a cold place, Fern spoke up again. But Bulba didn't answer, and so she gave up and buried her face beneath her feather quilt. Unknown to either Fern or Bulba, the skies over Tokyo at that moment were full of B-29s dropping an endless stream of incendiary bombs and burning down houses. Japan was losing the war it had started, but the only people who knew this were those few who had dragged the country into the war in the first place. Nobody else had any idea of the situation and carried on sleeping as peacefully as Iris and Robin. Either that or they were like Fern and Balba, shivering under the bedclothes, unable to sleep for the cold. Over them all, the snow kept steadily falling with a soft swishing sound. The next morning the weather was glorious. Iris and Robin put on their shoes and the squirrel fur coats Puck had given them and prepared to go outside. Careful not to wake their sleeping parents, they started to quietly lower themselves down on the rope. Just then there was a tremendous flapping of wings outside. "Cuckoo," came a familiar voice. "It's Arlo. Arlo's found us." They hurried down from the shelf and pushed open the lattice window, which creaked against the weight of the snow piled against it, and raced into the dazzling world outside. A lone pigeon was flying in low circles above the trees. The rainbow-colored ribbon that Ethan had tied to a larch branch last autumn was hidden under snow. Would Arlo see them? Iris waved the spider's silk rope as hard as she could, hoping to catch Arlo's eye. Robin began running over the snow towards the tree, thinking he could climb it and brush the snow off the ribbon. Just then a little whirlwind appeared, sending up a shower of powdery snow as it spun round and round. Up above, Arlo noticed a pretty white whirlwind on the ground. Something was kicking up a storm in the snow in the back garden of the house below him. He landed on the roof of the house to take a better look. In the middle of the whirlwind was some kind of fiery red creature. Then he heard a crystalline voice like a silver thread snapping in his ear. "Arlo, it's us, Iris and Robin. We're here." "Cuckoo," he replied and flew down to the ground. The white whirlwind brushed past his feet, and an unfamiliar laugh rang out. Then, just beyond the white haze of snow, he saw his beloved Iris waving something shiny around. "Iris," he called. He'd found them at last. Careful not to startle his little friends, he hopped slowly over to them. "Iris, I'm glad to see you looking so well." "Arlo, I'm so happy to see you." Iris smiled up at him, her face pink like a hyacinth blooming on the snow. Robin was stuck in a snowdrift under the trees, kicking his legs as hard as he could to free himself, desperate to join Arlo and his sister, but the harder he kicked the deeper he sank into the snow and was unable to move. "Ha," the white whirlwind laughed in his ear. "Right now you're hoping I'll help you, aren't you?" Puck pulled him out of the snow and, still spinning, took him over to Arlo and Iris. Arlo looked at Puck in surprise. Then he noticed Robin and said nostalgically, "Robin, it's you. We meet again at last. Won't you tell your friend to keep still a moment? He's making me dizzy." Hearing this, Puck began spinning for all he was worth, like a mole trying to rid its entire body of fleas. It was as if 10 of him had appeared in the garden. But Iris knew how to deal with him. "Faster, faster," she said in her best big sisterly voice. "Now come over here next to me." Puck suddenly quietened down, then disappeared into the forest at the end of the garden, his red waistcoat blazing. "What on earth was that?" asked Arlo, astounded. So Iris told Arlo about their strange new friend. "That little imp likes guessing what you're going to say before you say it. And if you want him to do something, you have to tell him to do the opposite. He's really funny. And he's kind too. If it wasn't for him, you'd never have seen us just now, would you?" Then she told him about the rainbow-colored ribbon tied to the branch on the tree. "Really? I was thinking you'd already forgotten me. I came to Nigeria at the end of August, and have been looking for you since then, you know. I'm really glad we've finally met up again. We're living in a town just the other side of the lake. It's a bit warmer there than it is here." "We? Are your parents with you?" asked Robin. "No, they're in Nagano," Arlo said a bit shyly. "While I was looking for you, I met a pretty white pigeon, and I've been living with her." He turned to Iris. "She's very keen to meet both of you, too. She really likes this rainbow ribbon and wants one of her own, so I told her that it was a sign for my dear friends Iris and Robin, and I couldn't give it to her. But she told me that when I found you, I should ask you for another one for her." Iris laughed in delight and promised Arlo she would give him a ribbon to take to her. "Arlo, please let me fly with you again." Robin couldn't contain himself any longer. "I've been longing to get on your back and fly through the sky again." Arlo happily held out his gray wing for him. "Oh, we've finally found you. And what's more, there's not just one, but 2 of you now. We'll never part from you ever again, said Iris, with a sigh of relief, waving the sparkling rope at Robin as he rode on Arlo's back.